The BCN Liberation Triangle. Black Christian nationalism seeks to change society in order to accomplish the liberation of black people and realizes that we as a people are engaged in a struggle for power and for our survival. We utilize the BCN Liberation Triangle as a godly symbol to Kasanyawatu and bring black people together to create oneness and unity amongst our people, to build a nation within a nation, where we control our own institutions that governs our lives. The Liberation Triangle is a symbol of Cody, where we voluntarily tax ourselves to fund the black nation, and is the financial basis of building a nation. The Liberation Triangle is also a symbol of Kazi, which is communal work and responsibility, where we collectively work together on a common program that's designed to liberate the African diaspora from the oppression, exploitation, and brutality of our colonial oppressors. Through Kasanyawatu, Kodi, and Kazi, we will once again build the kingdom of heaven on earth for our people throughout the African diaspora. As black Christian nationalists all over the world, we pledge to let the power of the Liberation Triangle work its wonders in us, to take the power of the Liberation Triangle to African people across the world. May God and the black nation be our witness that we exist to take black Christian nationalism to black people everywhere.
It's been a few weeks since I've been up here, so I'm gonna have to shake the rust off. Shake the rust off. We've had a break. We've had several speakers the last few weeks, and they all been doing a good job. You know, we hope y'all been enjoying them. And we, and like I said, we're constantly looking for others as well. You know, but I know myself and Takuma, we've enjoyed this break.
Amen.
No books in the bed. But we're going to deal with Ezekiel and Baruch. We're going to touch on him as well. But the first thing, we had an insert in your handout. We have trying to lay out the prophetic period. It's kind of two graphs to kind of get you to look at it a little differently. I had a conversation with one sister, and she, and I hope she don't take this personal, and I don't know if she's in here right now, look around, but she might be, but she said she wanted to know why, when we've been talking about the prophetic period, that we talking about the same thing. We talking about Assyria, we talking about the Babylonians. Didn't we cover that? Didn't we talk about that last week and all that? So obviously there's some confusion with the prophetic period, and we want to try to straighten that up with Ezekiel. She also wanted to know why we haven't been prophesying about, you know, Jesus to come and all that. Isn't that what the prophets is all about? They prophesied about Jesus. And so, well, okay, sister, either we're not teaching very well, or, you know, that's a misunderstanding on black Christian nationalist theology.
That's right. Well,
that's right. Or she's new. Yeah. So in that little insert, you know, we have the books kind of laid out on that first part, and you can see under the prophetic books where it says you know, a couple of things we need to touch on, like the Isaiah and the major prophets. We have there Isaiah 1, 2, and 3. So we say in Isaiah, well, you know, what is this Isaiah 1? Isaiah covers about 200 some years in the prophetic period. So he dealt with pre-exile, exile, and post-exile. So it is not one book of one person. This is probably several authors, and they all been merged together, covering this long period of time, because we know he probably more than likely could not have lived 220 some odd years. Then you also go down into Daniel. That was another thing that came up and said, well, Malachi, when I look at my Bible, Malachi is right next to Matthew in the Bible. So isn't Malachi talking about, you know, the New Testament? I said, well, the Bible, and I think Z. Como brought that up last week, the books in the Bible are not in chronological order. Right. You know, some of the minor prophets prophesied before the major prophets. Right. And some of the minor prophets predate a lot of the major prophets. So we have a graph there. The book of Daniel, which is one of the major prophets, we're saying that that book and the stuff that he's preaching about probably happened during the Maccabean era. So all that we need to understand how this stuff is flowing, and a lot of the prophetic books are talking about Assyria, they're talking about the Babylonian, all this oppression and exploitation was going on, and the prophets were prophesying about, you know, the black nation Israel getting themselves together, keeping the law, keeping the covenant, and trying to throw off this bondage, this imminent disaster that was to come. That's right. So you have several dates, and some of the books in the Bible, they're hard to date, particularly Obadiah and the minor prophets and Jonah. They don't mention, most scholars date the books of the Bible, they mention some prophets, they mention some kings. And so, okay, well, we have a list of kings, so we can say if he mentioned this king, he probably prophesied in this era. So in the book of Obadiah and Jonah, it doesn't mention any kings, so you have to try to put together other things that were going on, other things to say to try to get some dates. Right. So all these dates, a lot of them are estimates, and some of them are hard because they do mention kings. So we just wanted to clear some of that up so it won't be any confusion about the prophetic period. And so that's the whole thing in a nutshell about that. And we have a list on the back with the kings that were in power, and then the prophets that came along that were prophesying in Israel. A lot of times there was contention between the prophets and the kings. They did not see eye to eye, and some of them was trying to speak truth to power, and the king, you know, like, if you in power, you don't want anybody talking about what you're doing is not right. Well, you got to squash that. You don't want people talking about you not doing something that's not right. You know, you just have a real problem with it. So a lot of the prophets going there, and the king's trying to, you know, shut them down, and so they get fired up, and they want to speak, and they want to talk. They say the Lord told them to say this, they got to say it. Amen. You know, so we want to understand that. So, you know, don't get confused about that. The prophetic period, it has to be interpreted as the prophetic period. Just one of the sections in the Bible. It's not prophesied, and there's nothing in the Old Testament prophesying about Jesus. Amen. We have to understand that that's that slave theology that we got from the slave church, and they're telling us that this stuff is talking about some Messiah, and it usually was white that was coming later. And they didn't call it the Messiah, they called it the Christ that was going to come. And a lot of times we don't like to use that term, because when you start talking about Christ and all this other stuff, it brings up that slave theology that we grew up on. Well, so we try to shy away from those things so that stuff won't creep up. Well, you know, because it is there. You wasn't raised black Christian nationalists. A lot of us were not. You know, you were taught slave theology. That's right. You were taught Christ crucified. That's right. Christ was supposed to come and save you from eternal damnation. Well, that's not the prophetic period. They're not talking about that. Well, so we just wanted to clear that up. So you got that. So I'm going to digress, and we're going to go to the lesson. We're dealing with the prophetic era, Baruch and Ezekiel, and they cover the period around 597 BCE. And we call it BCE, and I've said it plenty of times, it's supposed to be before Christ or before the common era. So you pick which one you want to use. You know, but I like before the common era. Exactly. You know, The prophetic books are one of the third major sections of the biblical books. The prophetic books are classified in several different ways. The most popular groups are as follows. We have the former and latter prophets, and you can see the list there with Joshua, Judges, Samuel, this prophet, because there were prophets that predated the prophetic era also. Then you have in your Bible, in the Christian Bible, you have what's called the latter prophets, which is Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, and then you have the 12. Originally in the Hebrew Bible, the 12 minor prophets were all one book. It was called the Book of 12. It wasn't 12 separate books. It was all one book together. And so the second section, you have the major and the minor prophets. And a lot of this is broken down with the Catholic and the Protestant canon. So you have Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, and the Book of 12. So we'll be clear about that. Then you have the early section 3, the early prophets and the writing prophets. So you have Moses, and then you have Elijah and Elisha. And then I also have one sister there, Sister Miriam. There was some sisters that were prophetic too. Y'all might not believe that, but the sisters were prophetic too. And here in the Shrine of Black Madonna, we don't have any problem with sisters getting up, preaching, and stating the word and teaching and all that. We don't have a problem. The Bible most of the time is written by men. It was a chauvinistic world, a male chauvinistic world. They don't talk a lot about women and don't give women a lot of credit. You haven't had Deborah in the period of the judges. I think she ain't got dealt with. She was, you can imply that she was a prophetess. But if you want to look up, she's in Exodus 15. And it specifically said that the prophetess Miriam, that was Aaron's sister. And then you have the writing prophets, all of it, what we have in the Bible is called the 17 writing prophets, which you have the prophets, then you have Baruch, and you have Lamentation. Now, they are not prophets, but they're in the prophetic period because it's covering that period of time. Then you move on to have the pre-exile, the exile, and the post-exile. So you have the pre-exile prophets, which is Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Daniel, and you see the list. And then a lot of that period covers a lot that was the imminent disaster that the prophets felt like was coming on. And a brief summation of that period, that pre-exile prophecy was, their message was concerned with the way of God, the nature of Israel's relationship as a people was imminent concern of God. And we're talking about communalism. To be unjust towards the people of God is to act in such a way that would eventually breach the covenant. So that's what the pre-exile prophets were talking about. They were talking about the covenant, they were talking about the relationship, and we we got to treat each other right, we got to try to work together, otherwise we're going to breach the covenant. Right. Then you move to the exilic prophet. That was after, the Syrians came, and if you had went to history class, they had a big discussion about the Syrians, the Babylonians, and all that. We talked about that yesterday. They destroyed the nation, and they went into exile. So first it was the Syrians came and destroyed the north. And if you have that, you can see this map over here, the divided kingdom. You have the north, Israel was on the top, and Judah was on the bottom. That's right. The Assyrians destroyed Israel on the top, the northern end. They were no more after 722 and 721 BCE. And then you just had the kingdom of Judah. So these exiled prophets, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and what we say 2nd Isaiah, were talking about what was happening with the Babylonians coming in because they eventually destroyed the kingdom too. Their message was concerned about a new understanding of Israel's relationship to God in light of the reality that the black nation Israel seemed incapable of keeping the law and covenant. Thus they returned into slavery. So in those books, Jeremiah, he's talking about a new covenant, a new heart I'm going to give you, I'm going to sprinkle you with water so you can, Israel had a whole hard time keeping the law. They had a hard time keeping the covenant. And by the time this destruction came and the nation was no more, these prophets were trying to deal with this Yahweh faith, this covenant that's been a disaster. The people couldn't keep it. You remember when Moses led them out of Egypt in the promised land. As soon as they got in the promised land, they started going towards other gods. Because they were all around and they started looking for other prophets and all this. You know, they're saying, I got to give you, we need a new heart.
Right.
We need a new mind. We need a new understanding. And we can say that today. You know, we have to have a new understanding so we can maintain the law and we can maintain the covenant. Especially as it relates to black Christian nationalism, because people can get mixed up and start doing other things and getting involved in this kind of thing. Next thing you know, we have a cultural nationalist group, you know, within the nation. You know, we're opposed to cultural nationalism. We have no problem with cultural, but these cultural nationalists, they for the most part are not going to struggle systematically for liberation. They're going to do individual acts of things, but we cannot throw off chapters of bondage as individuals. We need to be So these exiles, they were mostly concerned about the temple. The temple had been destroyed, and up to that time, God, Yahweh, was the temple, represented the temple.
Right.
How could we have a God? How could we worship Yahweh if we don't have a temple? Where does God reside? Mm-hmm. So after the destruction, the prophets start trying to teach them that, hey, even though you're in exile, you still can worship God. God is still there. God is here. God is there. God is everywhere.
That's right.
So that was the message that he was trying to get across to them as they moved to Babylon and they were in exile. So a lot of black nations, this was a time that they were confused. Their religion hadn't evolved to the point to where we've evolved today.
That's right.
You know, sometimes we've evolved to regress. They haven't evolved. You know, I haven't been thinking about this. I have a cousin who said that his church do not include the Old Testament. They are a New Testament church. They don't even use the Old Testament. I'm like, what kind of church is that? You know, they don't even use the Old Testament. So I don't know, because I guess it's all about Jesus. So why you need that other stuff? You know, it's difficult to understand. You got to have 10 books to understand. But I thought it was crazy that they don't even use the Old Testament. So we move to the next section, which is the post-exile section. And we're dealing with Haggai, Obadiah, Joel, and Zechariah. Their message was concerned with the restoration of rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem. They were concerned with the fidelity of the law and the ethics of the law. The priesthood and the temple were their main concern, because after the nation was destroyed, you couldn't call it the black nation Israel no more. The nation didn't exist anymore. There was no more nation. So they were coming back, and eventually the Persians took over, and they were allowed to come back to rebuild. And eventually that was the main concern with the exilic prophets. So that's summarizing the prophetic period. So all that's dealing with that time of period, that framework. So we have to look at it. If you look at it any other way, you're going to be confused. You know, you're going to be misguided. So, you know, that's what it is. So we put BCN teachers in the back of your program. And a lot of that, you know, we don't just put it there. It's stuff that we believe. It's stuff that we meditate on. It's stuff that we try to govern our lives by.
That's right.
So if somebody can read BCN Teaches 9, and it kind of summarize what we're trying to say. It's on in the back of your book.
The latter days foretold by the prophets ended almost 2,000 years ago. The end was climaxed by the fall of Jerusalem and the fort of Messiah and the dispersion of the black nation Israel throughout the world. Prophecies from the Bible cannot be applied literally to the problems and realities of today. Biblical prophecy voiced the will of God for the African nation of Israel at a particular time and place.
Keep on going, brother. Copy some more to it.
Okay. Only the ignorant wait for the fulfillment of the prophecies addressed to a past which is dead and finished. BCN is the living prophetic voice of God for African people in this day. And our prophecies will come to pass when black people totally commit their lives to the struggle against white oppression.
So the master teacher put that in there. That's some of our ideology. So we try to understand what's going on in the prophetic period. And we say we're the living remnant of the lost black nation Israel. That's right. We're small in number, we're small in group, but it doesn't take a whole lot of people to affect change.
Well.
You know, but we do feel like the prophecies of Jeremiah, baby Watchman will come to pass when we get more people to commit to the liberation struggle of black people.
That's right.
And that's what we're all about here at the Shrine of Black Madonna. We're about the liberation of black people. Amen. So we're going to move on to the book of Baruch, and so we can understand some of these other books in the Bible that's in there. If you don't have the book of Baruch is the 29th book of the Bible. Baruch is part of the Apocrypha or the Deuterocanonical books. The word Apocrypha means hidden, while the word Deuterocanonical means second canonical.
Right.
Baruch is known as Jeremiah's secretary, not a prophet. The book provides additional information on the events that led up to and followed upon the fall of Jerusalem in 587 BCE. Right. So the Baruch wouldn't be in your Bible unless you have a Jerusalem Bible or you have a Bible that has the prophets. It wouldn't be included in there. But if you have a good Bible, it would have the Apocryphal books in it, because that covers a lot of period that led up to the New Testament and some of the things that expired. And we say a lot of times that you can understand the New Testament a whole lot better by reading the Apocryphal books, because that was the period that led up to it.
Right.
Baruch and Lamentations are closely associated with the weeping prophet Jeremiah, and it's a strong indication of the lasting reputation and the importance of his prophecy. And he prophesied in the south. So you can understand that the sun might have, I think I have the north here, but it's the south. So that's Baruch. He was the secretary of Jeremiah. Jeremiah had him writing stuff down, and he went to Babylon and all that, and he was telling the people, you know, what Jeremiah was saying and all that. So that's how you have to read that. And we have a few scriptures there. Let me see. Baruch, that's 2:11, 2:11 and 12. It says, "And now, Lord God, Israel, who brought your people out of the land of Egypt with a mighty hand, with signs and wonders, with great power and with outstretched arms, to win yourself a name renowned today. We have sinned, we have been irreligious, Lord our God. We have broken all the commandments." So he's dealing with the period of, you know, this total destruction that Z. Como was trying to deal with last week in Lamentations. Say, how do you understand, if God is the greatest God, if God is the biggest God, how do we justify, how do we understand our total destruction? That's right. And so the Bible writers said they're going to understand it by saying that we have sinned. And because of our sins, we broke the covenant, we did not keep the law, and therefore when our enemies came, we could not fight them off. Well, we were unable to fight them off, because when they attacked somebody's house over there, oh man, that's bad. They messing with her house over there. That's really bad. And then but I'm not gonna do nothing until they come to my house. Well, and then they attack somebody's house over there. Everybody's in this vacuum, this individuality thing, until it comes to your house. Right. Now you want everybody to come and help you. Your neighbor was in trouble, when your sister was in trouble. Oh, that's them. I'm sad. I know they you know, it's unfortunate they on hard times, but now we need to come together. Because it's on my side. It's at my door now, you know. So that's the problem with this thing. They were not together. They broke the covenant. They did not keep the law, and that was the parameters for them to keep the law and to be a covenant people and to be on the side of God. Amen. Somebody else read Baruch 2, 29 through 31. And we're going to just move on through the roots real quick.
If you do not listen to my voice,
Not everybody at the same time.
All right.
this great and innumerable multitude will certainly be reduced to a tiny few among the nations. When I lost the spot. Among which I shall disperse them. And I know very well that this people will not listen. It is so stubborn. But in the country of their exile, they will take all of this to heart and acknowledge that I am the Lord, their God. I will give them a heart and an attentive ear. They will sing my praises in the country of their exile.
Amen. Yeah, thank you, brother. So that's what I'm saying. They were a stubborn people. The black nation of Israel, they just had a hard time, staying with the laws that Abraham had went up on the mountain and came down with those tablets. That this is how we supposed to relate to one another. And we all know where he's got the information from, but in the Ten Commandments, that was the outline. And so, we talk about it all the time about, having this experience of God, because you cannot keep with this black liberation struggle if you don't have the experience of God.
That's right.
This thing that we're trying to accomplish is not rational and logical.
That's right.
We want everybody to have an experience of God. That's the only way you can stay committed to the struggle for 20, 30, 40 years.
Well.
Otherwise, you're just going to fall by the wayside. Because in your rational mind, you say, oh, this is too much. Black people is not going to ever come together. We can't work together. I don't like that brother. I don't like that sister.
Well.
I don't like my pastor. I don't like all this kind of stuff. All these ideas come up. But if you don't have the experience of God, you're going to be unable to stay with this struggle.
That's right.
And we said that to have the experience of God, you got to be in your group.
Well.
You got to be working with your brothers and sisters, because your group is your channel to God.
Well.
A lot of people don't believe that, but we said your group is your channel to God.
That's right.
But if people say, not my group. Your group goes but a righteous group will lead you to open you to the experience of God and come together. So we got to work on getting some righteous groups, some groups that's standing on the covenant, groups that's standing on the law. Amen. All right. We're going to move on to Brother Ezekiel.
Oh, well.
That was Baruch in a nutshell. He got some other stuff in there about some wisdom, because once they went to Babylon, people had to interpret different things. Your way of life is totally different now. Your thought process, your ideas about God and everything. You got these big, Babylonian statues everywhere, and they talking about their God, and you talking about your God, and he was back in Jerusalem destroyed.
Oh, well.
So a lot that they were in I think Zeke almost said that, they were in a theological crisis at that point.
That's right.
Because of what was going on. So the prophet Ezekiel prophesied to the Israelites in the south who were taken captive to Babylon. He also was taken captive himself in 597 BC. Many of the most skilled members of the leadership of the black nation were taken captive and carried off from their own nation. A greater captivity occurred 10 years later when Jerusalem was captive and the temple was burned to the ground. So we're saying that people who, and when they were taking captive, they went to Babylon, and they looked for a day where they would return back to Jerusalem and build a temple. They were like, oh yeah, we're going back next week. We heard the king said they're gonna release us, and we're gonna be able to go back and build the temple. Oh, next year we're gonna be able to, build our covenant and get the faith back going. So, they had some illusions that they were under, because the Babylonian was thinking about power, and they were thinking about they were gonna let them go and all that. So it was a confusing time for the black nation of Israel. A people who develop a slave mentality and a psychology of powerlessness have many fantasies and false hopes. The black nation Israel dreamed of an immediate return to Jerusalem and the easy restoration to their former glory as a nation. Instead, the city was attacked again in 587 and almost completely destroyed. A large number of Israelites were killed and many others were taken to Babylon.
Right.
So that's what was going on. They had this illusion that they were going to be free and they were going to go back. It's almost akin to the illusions that we have today. People talking about this post-black society.
Right.
Well.
We are post-black people. There's a book over in the culture center talking about post-black.
Well.
Can somebody tell me what that is? What post-black is?
Well.
I don't know what that means.
Huh?
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I
It's
just
said
huh?
It's
Post-black. How can we be post-black?
Well.
Yeah, how can we be?
That's right.
Post-black, but the book is over there. Uzachi tried to get me to read it. I said, brother, I don't have time. I can't even read it, you know. I got too many other stuff. I'm trying to understand Ezekiel. Post-black books, you know. We can't do it, you know. So some of I brought some, when Shingai gave me some of the intricate details about Jeremiah, I said, well, I need to bring some details about Ezekiel. But it said in Ezekiel, it says 11 times he said that the Spirit of the Lord entered him.
Right.
Well.
And so it's all through the Bible. He's saying that the power, he was, you know, was coming and going. You know, he was experiencing God on a regular basis.
Well.
Yeah, but that would be nice. You know? And then it says 90 times Ezekiel is referred to as the Son of Man.
That's right.
Now, a lot of people get confused about this Son of Man thing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to stop here. Y'all tell me what they say in the slave church about the Son of Man.
That's Jesus.
That's Jesus. So is that supposed to be Jesus in Ezekiel? They talk about
That's before Jesus. So
before Jesus, the Son of Man before the Son of Man.
Well.
Son of man means a man, you know, a regular man, just like any of us that were born into this world, but was still able to make that spiritual connection and give that stuff up for faith. Meaning that, yeah, he's just a man, but that don't mean you can't contact with God. Because this was a man.
Yeah.
This was a man, just as you are a man, if this man live on faith, why not you?
Oh yeah.
All right then.
All right. Oh yeah, right. That's good. We was talking about you. What's that, brother?
And then post-black.
Post what?
Post-black.
Oh, post-black.
Okay, that right there is, well, it ain't the Christ in the New Testament that's been, that is that slave mentality. They use that as a way they use it and they said that this new Christ was going to come down and do a rapture.
Yeah.
You know, and just
Rapture.
just gonna say.
Nita Baker made a song with rapture.
It don't matter what we do, how we do it. You know, this new Christ just gonna come and just snatch us all up.
Yeah. Make everything right.
Yeah, and that's post-black. It's black-hearted people. But all of a sudden now, we hope.
All right. Okay, brother. We appreciate that analogy. I know you made a good comment last week, man. Zikoma was talking about that slow boil.
Yeah.
The nation, there was a slow boil. Zikoma was talking about they were cooking their kids and it was a slow boil.
Yeah.
Ain't nothing about it like as bad as a slow boil.
Right.
You know, you gonna kill me, just go and take me out.
Right.
Don't make it slow. You know.
Right.
But what we're saying here from the PCN theology, the Son of Man is just simply a term that was used. If you read the Apocrypha books, you'll see a whole lot more of the Son of Man that's used many more times in the apocryphal books than it is in the Old Testament. You can also find that in the New Testament. But there's no messianic connotation there. We need to be clear about that. It was just simply talking about the righteous one, the chosen one, or, eventually became to be the Messiah, But that's what it is. And then there's 62 times the phrase that they should know that I am God. So that was a recurring theme in Ezekiel. He was constantly talking about when he's prophesying to the people, y'all gonna know that I am God. You will know that I'm the Lord. That's who's speaking to you. That's who's talking to you. But it occurs 60-some times in the book of Ezekiel. So that's some little tidbits about it. I got back from check God. He said there was so many thousand words in Jeremiah, and how many verses was it you said? You remember?
You didn't put me on the spot.
Yeah, there's quite a few. But also in Ezekiel, and I don't know if we have time, but there's during the call, Ezekiel is filled with some vivid imagery and symbolism. This symbolism is difficult to comprehend in a rational mind and describe Ezekiel's experiences or encounter with God. So you had visions of a chariot moving around, you had the heavens opening up, you have thunderstorms, clouds, you have living creatures resembling flashes of light, noises like waves, flashing, this, that, and other, wheel imageries, wheel within the wheel and all that, and living creatures with wings. So it's a lot of symbolism in there, and I know a lot of black people love to talk about that symbolism in Ezekiel, and we might tackle a little bit of that next week, not this week. So we have the eating of the scroll. I need somebody to read Ezekiel 2:8-10. That's Ezekiel 2:8-10. Go ahead. All right.
You son of man, listen to the words I say. Do not be a rebel, like the rebellious said. Open your mouth and eat what I'm about to give you. I looked. A hand was there stretching out to me and holding a scroll. He unrolled it in front of me. It was written on back and front. On it was written, lamentation, wailing, moaning. He said, son of man, eat what is given to you. Eat this scroll. Then go and speak to the house of Israel.
Amen. All right. So some of the symbolism, and you find it also in Jeremiah. He was supposed to consume a scroll, and he said it was sweet, like honey and all that. But what they're trying to deal with is him really getting into what he's supposed to do. His call. What is this thing really about? And the first thing he had to do was connect to his people, the suffering of his people. And in that scroll, he said it was lamentations, wailing, and mourning. And that's what we were talking about in that period. It was nothing but suffering. So he had to connect, because when you deal with that call and all that, a lot of times people don't want to accept it. You want to tell the Lord to turn me loose and all that. But you can't work for your people. You can't struggle for liberation if you don't identify with the suffering and the pain and the victories of our people. The prophet Ezekiel accepted his call from God to deliver a message to the black nation Israel, but he found it very difficult to persuade them and to change them from their sinful ways. And we've talked about it, we're saying they were defiant and obstinate people. The people they just were disloyal, they were corrupt, they were stubborn. Just didn't want to hear what the prophets said, and the prophets went to great lengths, great extremes to try to get this message across. Then you had Jeremiah, God said, I'm going to give you the strength to deal with these rebel people. This is a rebel tribe, they're just not going to do what I want them to do. And
3:8 says, but now I will make you as defiant as they are and as obstinate as they are. I'm going to give you the strength to fight against this rebel nation. And a lot of times people people accuse S5 of that. Obstinate and a rebel group. Because we say this and we say that, you know, but all we saying is thus says the Lord. We know how they should be, and when we don't see them, we got to say something. And I know it's a thorn in some people's side, and sometimes we're a thorn in our own side. But this experience of God that you have, and you know, what does it lead you to do?
Well,
what does it lead you to say? You know, you just go have a ritual and then you what? Go home and watch TV? What is the purpose of it? What's it supposed to be doing for you?
Right.
So we say in our response to meditation, we say in our ritual, we say when we are open to our inner divinity and can be touched by the cosmic power of God, and Cooper's Thunder will come like a mystical story. And then we say the overwhelming power of God enters into us, the creative intelligence of God directs us, and we become one with God and around people everywhere. And that's what we talk. That's what Ezekiel was doing. He had experience of God, and it's just an explosion. So he's explaining it the best that he can explain it. Right. It's no different than the Pentecost with the rush of the mighty wind. That's right. And tongues of fire. You got to explain it the best you can.
Well, that's right.
You got to, but it's got to lead you to do something.
Well,
it's got to lead you to do something for your people. If you have an experience of God, or you think you have an experience and you do absolutely nothing for your people, what good is this experience?
that's right.
So the prophet of Isaiah was known as the prophet of doom. The prophet of Jeremiah was known as the weeping prophet that was shed God's book. And then Ezekiel was known as the watchman. He watched over his people. Yes. Well, what was this thing? He was watching over his people so he could see what was going on, so he could tell them what's happening.
Well,
we have got to get ourselves together. We have got to be more communal. We have got to be more loving. We have to be a nation.
Well,
and that was what he was trying to deal with. So that the watchman concept that he had is in there several times in there. But the whole thing, we just have to understand that he was connected to his people. And no individual that lives outside of the reality of their group. You can't live this post-black concept like we're not black anymore.
Well,
you know, y'all black over there, but I'm post-black, post-racial, or post-something. This country is the same as it was when we got here. Like what you said, the kids, black and white. White people over there, black people. This is what it is. I'm sorry, that's what it is.
Well,
that's the world we live in. You cannot live outside of that reality.
Well,
you know, black people are oppressed and exploited. We cannot live. There's some who have made some financial gain.
Well,
there's some who have some wealth, you know, but they still can't live out. They can try, you know, you move as far away from the black community as possible, but you still have that reality. You remember LeBron James said they painted nigga all over his gate at his house in California.
That's right.
So he can't remove himself from the black experience.
Yeah.
It's going to find you. It's going to find you some kind of way. So we said that sometimes you feel that the Holy Spirit has touched you. You feel power that you didn't know you had. You feel a commitment to something that you didn't know you could feel.
Well,
you want to move into areas of risk, sacrifice, and you didn't realize you had the courage or even dream of them. These are the moments when you have felt the Holy Spirit.
Well,
the basic question is, what is your response?
Amen.
To the Holy Spirit.
Well.
What are you going to do?
All right.
You just going to have this experience, or is it going to lead you to work for the liberation of black people? It's going to lead you to do some black slave work.
Well.
It's going to lead you to do some Cosby work. It's going to lead you to make yourself more accessible to your group.
Well.
You know, what is it? It's going to lead you to more commitment to the church, more KEB, you know, more something, but it has to be some kind of response.
Well.
Otherwise, it's a waste of the Holy Spirit.
That's right.
In a state of confusion, will you help us, Lord, one another? Yes, we are misusing. I know we are. And every day, someone's being abused. But I come to tell you, don't you worry. You gotta stand firm. See, things will change. Yes, they will. After a while. And I know God is gonna raise up. He's gonna raise a nation that will obey. Do you believe he will do it? I believe he'll reign. I believe he's gonna reign. One that will obey. I know it may seem dreary right now, but he's gonna reign. Gonna raise the nation. I know my God will reign. Yes, he will. One that will. Yeah. Yeah. So as you go along your way, and it may get hard sometimes. Sometimes you may not see. Oh, there may not be a sunny day. Oh, but don't you be worried. Right then you need to just call